Legislative District, organized for you by the League of Women Voters of Arlington, with a grateful welcome to the League's co-sponsors. We have the AAUW, American Association of University Women, the Alexandria branch of Nu Psi Zeta, and the local chapter of Moms Demand Action. The forum is offered for your information as the June 11th primary election day nears. Hope you marked that date on your calendar. My name is Ann Murphy. I'm pleased to serve this afternoon as the program moderator. I'm pleased to introduce Delegate Alfonso Lopez and Mr. Julius D. Spain Sr., known to many as JD. Mr. Spain is a 26-year veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. He's a lifelong community activist. He is married and the proud parent of 3 children, and he may share more about himself in his comments. Both of these candidates provided bios that had lots of rich information. So when you moderate, it's like, okay, how much do you say? I like to say, let them tell you what they think is important about themselves. Mr. Lopez is a lifelong Democrat, activist with more than 25 years of federal and Virginia legislative experience. He's a 3-term member of the Virginia House of... 4-term member, sorry. Update your resume.
Well said.
Member of the Virginia House of Delegates, serving the 49th District. He also serves as the whip of the Virginia House Democratic Caucus. He's married, proud dad of 2 sons. Okay, that was still accurate. And his bio, just as JD's does, includes much more, and he may share some of that in his remarks as he sees appropriate. So the League of Women Voters, for those of you who are not members or are not familiar with us, was founded in 1920. We're preparing to celebrate the centennial in 2020.
Wow.
100 years of doing this work. And the League in Arlington was founded in 1944 and is preparing to celebrate its 75th birthday. So the League began as a mighty political experiment designed to help newly enfranchised women carry out their responsibilities as voters and participants in shaping public policy. And to that end, it is a nonpartisan organization. It neither supports nor opposes candidates or political parties at any level of government. We seek to educate voters on issues and encourage action because, this is a saying, study without action is futile, just as action without study is futile. So as part of the League's voter service commitment, we provide unbiased, factual information about voting procedures, candidates, and ballot issues. Today's forum serves to bring to the electorate an opportunity to hear from the candidates for the 49th Legislative District of the Virginia House of Delegates. So, let's get started. Here are a couple of statements. First, the candidates' campaign literature is available over on the side there. My notes say in the rear, but the way we set up the room, it's on the side. The forum is being videotaped and will be available on the websites of the co-sponsors, but know that in accordance with FCC rules, video of debates may not be edited in any manner, and a reproduction must be screened in its entirety. These videos are not permitted to be used for political campaign purposes. Just as I've silenced mine, I would invite we really don't need to hear anybody's phone ringing in the midst of our afternoon. So we're delighted to have you come to the program, and we look forward to a lively and a respectful discussion. of your important issues, your issues. The League promotes civil and informed discourse on civic issues, and we continue to honor those values that were determined almost 100 years ago. The League of Women Voters of Arlington, by the way, you know that the League of Women Voters is not just for women. I hope everybody knows that. We have many male members, at least one of which is here, and we welcome men and women to join us, and there's membership and sign-up information over here on the side. So now let's really get started. Here are the rules of engagement, just so that everybody is aware. Each candidate is going to make introductory remarks, no longer than 3 minutes. And there are timers watching, and they will be signaling as appropriate. After the introductory statements, we'll get to your questions. So the question and answer portion will get underway. Volunteers have distributed cards. If you need one, raise your hand. Remember that every question on those cards that is asked is addressed to both candidates. So you don't want to be asking a question just for one or the other. Questions ought to be brief, specific, and only one question on each card, please. You should know, too, that if we don't get to ask your question, all of the questions will be compiled and provided to each of the candidates' campaigns. What they do with it is up to them. Hopefully, they'll send you an answer. And I, as the moderator, will read the first question from the audience. Question 1 will first be addressed to candidate Spain, and question 2, and then Delegate Lopez will have an opportunity to add his 2 cents, his 2 minutes worth of sense. And then question 2 will be addressed then to Delegate Lopez. And then I'll try to remember, I'm supposed to keep reversing that, so you can help me. In any case, the response time to questions is 2 minutes for each candidate. And again, the timers are watching, and they'll be signaling. We also try, through the question period, to really cover a wide swath of issues. So if we get 5 questions, all about affordable housing, we're probably going to ask 1, maybe 2 if there's a different twist on it, just so you're aware of that. But remember, the questions will still be provided to the candidate's campaign. And then in conclusion, the candidates will have closing statements, no more than 3 minutes. And after a brief thank you, the program is scheduled to end at 4. We probably have the room for a few minutes after that, so if you want to have a little one-on-one tete-a-tete, that's up to you and to the candidates. Questions from the candidates on any of that? Not at all?
Very clear.
Good. Timers, ready? Okay, 3 minutes. First, we have Delegate Lopez.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I want to thank our host, the League of Women Voters, and Ann Murphy for moderating. And thank each and every one of you for taking 2 hours out of your Saturday afternoon on such a beautiful day to be civically engaged and civically active and civically minded here in the 49th District. The League plays such a vitally important role in our community and should be truly commended. Today, more than ever, your mission to create and support an active and informed citizenry is vitally important. So thank you very much for all that you do. I believe in a Commonwealth that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind. As your delegate, I've been a champion for our values in Richmond, and I'm proud of the work I've done and the relationships I've developed to find common ground and get things accomplished. Over the last 8 years, I've been the patron, co-patron, or chief co-patron of 115 bills that have been signed into law. 49 of those bills were bipartisan. I'm proud to have passed legislation addressing everything from small business procurement to tenant protections to criminal justice reform as it relates to driver's licenses, suspensions, to expanding temporary assistance for needy families, benefits for those pursuing apprenticeships, to cybersecurity protections for our military and passport holders, to incentivizing solar energy and renewable energy and protecting immigrants from fraud. I'm especially proud of my legislation that created the Virginia Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which has already invested over $1.7 million on projects right here in our home community, and millions of dollars across the Commonwealth. And as the Democratic whip, working as a part of our House leadership team, I'm honored to have, among other things, increased teacher salaries by 5%, secured a dedicated source of funding for Metro, worked to close the school-to-prison pipeline, expanded no-excuse absentee voting, and perhaps most importantly, expanded Medicaid and healthcare protections to 400,000 Virginia families, including 5,600 of our neighbors here in the 49th District. Going forward, we must focus on jobs and the economy, education, and the needs of working families. I pledge to continue fighting for better schools, long-term transportation solutions, environmental safeguards, new jobs and economic development, and the Virginia values of embracing diversity, tolerance, and compassion that we all hold dear. I'm humbled by the support and endorsements of everyone from U.S. Senator Tim Kaine and former Governor Terry McAuliffe to members of the Arlington School Board and members of the Arlington County Board, to the leadership of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and countless neighbors and prominent activists in the 49th District. I'm also grateful for the endorsements of a wide range of organizations, and from the firefighters to the labor community to the environmental community and the Virginia Education Association. They understand, as I do, that politics is about improving people's lives. As I hope I've shown you over the last 8 years, I will always work hard to make sure that Virginia is a place where we lift everyone up and leave no one behind. I look forward to the conversation this afternoon.
So good afternoon to the League of Women Voters and everyone in attendance. Again, League of Women Voters, thank you for hosting this debate. And this is actually the second time the incumbent and myself, we've been able to sit down and have a conversation with voters of the district. And I don't take this opportunity and time lightly, because this is serious business. But at the core of this election, I believe, what we're talking about is a culture that I've observed that rids itself, and we're full of complacency in government. A culture of complacency in government. And we have issues with judgment, character, integrity, and we need to provide our voters with a solid alternative. As I look around the room this afternoon, when I came in here, you know, is this room today, are we making up the 49th? Is this really the 49th district? Yes, we are. I live in Penrose, a couple blocks from the incumbent. But a lot of our voters aren't engaged. I'm out here knocking on doors. They don't know what's going on. They haven't heard from the incumbent. But the core group does, the ones that are involved. What I'm doing is bringing to you an alternative based on my past experience, my knowledge and understanding of not only the legislative process, but of government. I'm a proven leader, a combat veteran, appointed by the County Board Commission to work on the Civil Service Commission, excuse me, I said commission, but board. And I've been there at grassroots level. I'm not a polished politician. I don't have 9 or 8 years under my belt doing this, but I'm a public servant, and I work hard. And I'm hoping that you will afford me the opportunity on June 11th to serve as your delegate. And I look forward to your questions. If I don't have the answer to all the questions, trust me, I'll get back with you. Thank you for your time and attention as well.
Okay, we'll go to the question and answer format now. We've already got numerous questions. Who's collecting the questions? Somebody here? Someone collecting them?
Yes,
I'll do it.
we got it.
Okay, we have a couple here. Thank you. Okay, timers, you ready? We're down to 2 minutes now for this. And the first question will go to Mr. J.D. Spain, and then that question will refer to Delegate Lopez. J.D., can you share with the group, what is your position on the new bill regarding gerrymandering?
So the new bill on gerrymandering is, my understanding of it is that we have a group of individuals that have been appointed, citizens, to look at redistricting within the Commonwealth. And I think that's good for us, to bring not just only politicians, but people from the community together from both the right and the left to look at the issues as it relates to redistricting and gerrymandering. Because trust me, it is happening. It is occurring, not only here in the Commonwealth, but across this country. So I think right now, what's going on is positive. There's more we need to do. I'll be anxious to sit back and watch and see what comes out of this this group of individuals that are evaluating gerrymandering and redistricting. But I support. I will support issues and policies that allow us to make sure it's fair across the board for everyone. That no minority group, no groups of people are being gerrymandered. Thank you.
Delegate Lopez?
Citizens should choose their elected officials, not the other way around. Citizens should choose their elected officials, not the other way around. I ran on gerrymandering reform and taking gerrymandering out of the hands of the General Assembly and the political elected leaders in Virginia. Now, the bill that was actually passed this year, a constitutional amendment, has to come back again next year, has to be voted on twice, is an important step forward. However, there are issues with it. It is not a perfect bill. Is it considerably better than what we have right now? Yes. Did I support the bill? Yes. Have I supported countless gerrymandering reform measures in Virginia for the last 8 years? Yes. Have I been fighting the racially gerrymandered districts that we have finally gotten the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn? Yes. Do we need to do better in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Yes. I've been very supportive of gerrymandering reform. I've been working with groups like Virginia 2021 for years. Brian Cannon is an old friend of mine. This is an issue that its time has come. Gerrymandering is happening in very insidious ways all around the country. Virginia is a leader. We need to lead on this issue as well.
Thank you. This is on a totally different topic. Please describe your past work and future priorities for advancing the rights and opportunities of people with disabilities.
I have learned an incredible amount in the last 8 years from activists like Daniel Davis and leaders across Virginia about disability reform issues. Disability issues are not narrow. They're not just focused. They affect everybody. And they're not just in issues of issues of hospitalization or treatment. They're in banking. They're in housing construction. We've just this past session had to deal with a banking issue regarding disability rights. And the pushback we've gotten from the bankers is significant. They don't want to comply with the ADA. They're working to fight that. I've been talking to the governor's office and the policy team to try to maybe amend or basically veto the current bill that's out there. And I'm very honored to work with so many amazing activists across the state on issues like this. The issue, though, is that we still have we have much more to do, especially in the area of housing. Right now, there are no rules like in other states to build houses that are ADA compliant for wheelchairs. It would not be that much more expensive for builders to build to code, to build to statewide code. What we need to do is we need to be able to break the builders' lobbies, break the apartment lobby, and make sure that they understand this is an issue whose time has come. We need to be compliant for everyone, not just the able.
Thank you.
So I can't say at this point in time that I've had extended work in the area of disabilities, but having served at the NAACP, we have taken on initiatives to address disabilities within the minority community. Here in Virginia, and the incumbent has alluded to a few things of note that we need to remain vigilant as leaders to ensure that those with disabilities, and I would do that if elected, to ensure those with disabilities are taken care of and respected, just like everyone else. So I would pledge to do that, notwithstanding there's a whole litany of other issues I would assume that need to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question about gun violence. How can we best address it in all its forms? This one goes to Mr. Spain
Right.
first.
Thank you for that question as it relates to gun violence. Make no mistake about it. Gun violence is serious. Gun violence plagues our nation. Gun violence plagues our Commonwealth. And we, as a people, need to make strict account, and as leaders, notice to what are we looking for in guns and gun control. I don't believe guns need to be in the classroom. That's number one. But we've had conversations about that. I hope that never comes here in Virginia. But gun control is a serious issue. The NRA and this strong arm has embedded itself with a number of politicians across our great land, and it's unfortunate. But I will do everything in my power as it relates to gun control to ensure that when we do background, we ensure that background checks are taking place for everyone who wants to get a gun. If someone decides to take a gun and want to sell it to someone else, that there's also a background check taking place there. All right? We can't just be out here with everyone having guns. I understand their rights. People have a right to bear arms, but gun control needs to be, it will be a priority as well. Thank you.
Lopez?
Every day I drop my little boy off at Patrick Henry Elementary School right there. And every day I drop him off at Thomas Jefferson Middle School. I'm worried if that's the last time I'm going to see him. I'm worried if it's the last time I'm going to see him. Gun violence in America has gotten to the point where it is an epidemic. School shootings are an epidemic. There is actually legislation that's been put in by members of the Republican caucus to put guns in classrooms. I serve on the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committee for the last 8 years. I'm the number 3 ranking Democrat on the committee. I have seen a systematic whittling down of gun violence prevention bills over the last 8 years. 1 gun a month, gotten rid of. The former chair of the committee, Scott Lingenfelter, after every bill was brought up, would ask the NRA what their position was, and then he would ask on an equal footing what the Virginia Citizens Defense League thought. The Virginia Citizens Defense League thinks the NRA is too liberal. I put in legislation addressing, making it a misdemeanor, just a misdemeanor, that you don't give a firearm to a 4-year-old. I put in legislation to make sure that we actually get rid of the default procedures in Virginia, where it says, if there's a NICS system, and if you actually go through the NICS system when you're trying to purchase a gun, there's an FBI background check. And if it's not fit, most of the checks happen within a few seconds. But sometimes it takes longer than that. We have a rule in Virginia that if you actually don't do it within a single business day, well then the procedure can move forward. You can buy the gun. The FBI says it should be 5 days. 5 days. The fact is that we need to pass sensible gun violence prevention legislation in Virginia. Not dealing with that issue is a crime.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Delegate Lopez. LGBTQ rights are under aggressive attack. Suicide rates are extremely high for transgender people. What, if anything, have you done to protect the human rights of the LGBTQ community?
Who here remembers Delegate Bob Marshall? Referred to himself as the chief homophobe of Virginia. He had something known as the Marshall-Newman Amendment that basically said in the state constitution that marriage is between a man and a woman. I was part of the statewide coalition board that fought that back over a decade ago. I fought it tooth and nail with folks like Charlie Conrad and Jay Fizette and LGBTQ leaders from around the Commonwealth. I've also fought in the General Assembly legislation that would also make sure that we had conversion therapy. I put in legislation I've helped and supported legislation that actually addressed non-discrimination in employment, non-discrimination in housing. And every one of those bills are defeated 6 o'clock in the morning in subcommittees by the Republican leadership. The fact is that we are behind the national curve when it comes to LGBTQ protections and rights. I've worked incredibly closely with my friend Danica Rowan I have worked incredibly closely with Adam Evan and Mark Sickles and Mark Levine, who puts in the comprehensive bill every year to address each and every one of these issues that need to be fixed in the Virginia State Code. We have a majority next year in the House of Delegates and the State Senate. These issues that have been the work of a lifetime are the work of a few afternoons. Thank you.
Right. Again, LGBTQ is we, LGBTQ community, we're all together. We're one family. Everyone has rights. They have rights. Now, I haven't put forth legislation, but I've worked with individuals from that community, from that area, that community. And I believe there's more we can do. They come and talked about a bill that was put forth. I haven't read that bill, but I would definitely be inclined to support it, right? Because I believe everyone has rights, equal rights. And for our community, our LGBTQ community, they definitely deserve the same. And I will do everything in my power to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, here's the question that comes up at every candidate forum in Arlington for sure. This one starts with Mr. Spain. What proposals do you have for affordable housing in our district?
That's a good question. Thank you for the question as it relates to affordable housing. There's a number of issues going on with affordable housing and proposals. I'm innately aware of what the incumbent has put forth, but there's more we can do. And when we talk about this area, the 49th district, there is a hardcore reality. We have a affordable housing trust fund, money's put into it, but there's more that needs to be done. We have affordable living, affordable wage issues that directly correlates to why people can't get affordable housing. All right, so you can put all the money you want to in the kitty, but people aren't getting an affordable wage. They can't get an affordable house. That's the reality, and that's what I'm hearing as I'm out here. It's one, like I said earlier, it's good to put forth initiatives and efforts, but if I'm down there in Richmond, there's something we need to pay strict attention to. When Amazon came here a few weeks ago, what happened? Real estate taxes started going up. They went up already. Property taxes went up. Rent went up. That's a reality. So we need to figure out and address the second and third order effects behind a company like Amazon coming. Now, I had the opportunity earlier this week to meet with some officials from Amazon, and they want to work with companies like the NAACP and leadership to address things like affordable housing. But trust me, it's coming. And how we tackle that, it's going to take a comprehensive effort and teamwork.
Lopez?
Working as a team with both sides of the aisle, in my second year in the Virginia House of Delegates, I was able to get the Virginia Affordable Housing Trust Fund passed. It was a major piece of legislation that has brought literally tens of millions of dollars to the table to every corner of Virginia. Affordable housing is not just an urban issue. It's not just a suburban issue. It's a rural issue as well. And the fact is that if there's no affordable housing in a place like Galax or Grundy, and the only thing you have available to you is a double-wide trailer with mold and a hole in the roof, and you've got kids living in that environment, affordable housing affects every corner of the Commonwealth. Now, I agree. Affordable housing is not just it's not just one issue by itself. It needs to be a part of a basket of issues: education funding, transit, minimum wage. I've put forward and worked on minimum wage issues ever since I joined the General Assembly. At the same time, what I'm incredibly proud of is that we've had over $1.7 million worth of projects on affordable housing just in our community alone. Here's the kicker. When it comes to Amazon, the people and the communities that are next to, within 2 to 8 minutes drive of South Eid Street and where HQ2 is going to be based, those folks live in the 49th district. Four of the poorest areas in Northern Virginia, not Green Valley, Arlington Mill, 4 Mile Run, and parts of Arlington Ridge. I've had literally a dozen phone calls from folks I've known for decades bought their home in 1958 for $18,000 and are now paying $4,800 a year in property taxes. We point them to state programs, to county programs, but those aren't bottomless pits. We also need to ensure that renters are taken care of. I don't care about the incentives for people coming in 5, 7, 10 years from now. I care about the constituents who live in the 49th district right now, and they're scared. And that's why I fight for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's why I got $18 million for it this year.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. I just want to remind people that, do you all have a card? Do you want questions? Do you have questions to ask? Okay. Here's a question. Please explain your position on late-term abortion, particularly in cases in which the baby is born. I'm referring specifically to the bill introduced in the General Assembly during the last session.
Okay.
That one goes to Delegate Lopez.
Kathy Tran's legislation was basically a bill that addressed the subtle and overt rollbacks of a woman's right to choose in Virginia for the last 20 years. It addressed trap legislation, which is the kind of parameters that a facility has to meet before it can be allowed to do abortions and do women's crisis centers or women's health centers. It also addressed the 3 physicians versus 1 physician issue. The fact is that bill was misconstrued intentionally by some folks who either didn't present it properly or took it out of context. Infanticide is illegal in Virginia. Let me repeat, infanticide is illegal in Virginia. And the times that when a medical professional has to actually take action is when you are in a catastrophic situation where the baby or newborn infant's life is horribly damaged. Horribly damaged. And I think we're talking about less than 10 incidences in the last decade. Everyone believes that abortion should be legal and rare. But the way that that bill was misconstrued and the way it was used to demonize the patron was a real shame. There you go. Sorry.
I couldn't quite tell it. I didn't want to sort of assume it.
So, abortion should be legal, but rare. That's what the incumbent stated, and I agree with that 100%. I did not read the bill, everyone. I don't know the intricacies of that bill and what it talks to and what it meant, but that's something I would definitely have to take for the record and follow up so I can be well versed on it. I just don't have the answer or understand every concept of that statute or that bill. Thank you.
Okay. The next question goes to Mr. Spain. Start there. What measures will you introduce or support as a delegate to improve school conditions, not just in the 49th, but especially across the state?
Yeah. Thank you for that question as it relates to schools and their conditions across the state. We look not too far from here, we have some trailers in the lot on the property of the schools. And from what I've read and what I've observed over the past couple of years, that's that's happening quite a bit across the Commonwealth. We can't push it all to the Virginia Department of Education and say, hey, here's the money, do what you want to do with it. But there's a reality here where our population is growing, the schools are bursting at the seams, there's not enough space, and the conditions of the schools are not, in a lot of cases, up to par and up to standard. So what I would like to be is a champion to work with Virginia Department of Education to address those issues of concern as it relates to the conditions of our school, because we want our kids going into schools that are green, that don't have asbestos all over the place, are happening, and the conditions are in keeping with what the high expectations of our society in an environment where our kids can learn. So I would work hard with the Virginia Department of Education to address the conditions of our school.
Thank you. Delegate Lopez?
Arlington and Fairfax is blessed with some of the best schools, not only in the United States, but in the world. There's a reason why people clamor to come to our community, because of the quality of our local schools. That being said, teachers across Virginia should be paid a professional wage. That's why we worked so very hard to get a 5% increase in their salaries this past session. We also know that trailers aren't the answer. They're just not. But think about it. If we have trailers in Arlington and Fairfax, just think what it's like in Galax and Grundy and Danville and Pennington Gap. They're not just they're not going for the bells and whistles. They're not going for gifted learning. They're not going for AP classes. They're not going for special ed classes. They're just trying, in some cases, keep the lights on. What we have to do is reform how we fund schools in Virginia. This is something we've been talking about for years, but we can't get it through the Republican majority. It's important that we finally do it. Senator Bill Stanley's bill was an innovative approach to creating funding mechanisms to create better, stronger, newer schools in rural parts of Virginia. That kind of legislation is the kind of legislation we need to be using as a foundation to build on. But I think at the end of the day, we need to fundamentally reform how we actually fund schools in Virginia. Because if it's based solely on local recordation taxes, then a county that has 8,000 people is going to lose compared to a county like Fairfax or a county like Arlington. There's so much more we should be doing that we're not. Give us a majority in November, and you'll see action.
Well, that leads us right to our next question. So you can continue to have the floor, if you will. What are your goals for the Commonwealth in the event the Democrats flip both houses of the state legislature?
This right here is all 115 bills that I was the patron, co-patron, or chief co-patron of. Happy to show it to you afterwards. There are 7 times more ideas of things that didn't get passed over the last 8 years that need to get passed. We're talking about environmental safeguards that actually are environmental safeguards. Renewable energy that needs to be embraced in Virginia. Sensible gun violence prevention legislation. The DREAM Act. It's the first bill I put in every year. Every year. Transit funding that is truly transit funding. Transportation funding that works. And we need to sort of address something big called climate change. How about we do it finally? Education funding, higher education, investment. The list goes on and on and on. We could be here for 3 or 4 hours. If you want to see the kinds of legislation I want to get passed, look at the bills that I've put in the last few years. Look at the major pieces of legislation that I've worked on as a part of the House Democratic Caucus. We've gotten there. We've done it on things like Medicaid expansion. We have. That was done with 49 votes. Just think what would happen if we had 51. Just think what would happen if we had 51. The values that we cherish, the issues that we hold dear, will finally see the light of day. And let me just say to my friends who've watched this over the last few years, I put in for the last 4 years legislation to ban child labor on tobacco farms in Virginia, to change legislation that was put in the 1920s. We get a majority, child labor on tobacco farms stops. That's something that's very close and near to my heart. The most important thing for me, though, is the DREAM Act. It's the first bill I put in every year. that needs to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Spain?
Thank you. So, what will I do? I had a conversation with a counselor at a school here in Arlington not too long ago. And the counselor was talking to me about the future and was talking about mental health and how, as a society, despite everything that's going on, that we are not doing enough to help aid and assist our youth as it relates to anxiety, depression, behavioral health issues that are going on in our schools. Ladies and gentlemen, those individuals are the next generation of leaders. And we don't have to look far to realize and look at the analysis of what's going on in our school systems and our youth. There are clear indications of what's happening with our kids of color, the depressive state, and their lack and failures in a lot of cases to be able to move up. It's happening. And so what I want to do is I want to champion mental health reform at the state level and address it and be a champion for it. We need to do more. We just can't send money once again down to school systems and expect it's going to happen. We got to ensure the right mental health professionals are there. We got to ensure, even in the criminal justice system, that our police officers are being held accountable, our law enforcement officers are being held accountable for their actions. We got to ensure that there's mandatory implicit bias training for law enforcement officials here. That's not occurring. It's happening in some places. It's mandatory in other states like Minnesota, but we don't have that here. And that's why we have kids, people in Arlington and 49th that can walk around that are Hispanic and be chalked up and categorized as white, Caucasian. There's so many disparities going on around here that need to be addressed, and we can do some of this. I will do some of that at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question starts with Mr. Spain. What is your position on ERA, Equal Rights Amendment?
Right.
What do you think its chances are in Virginia next session?
Right, so there was the ERA, thank you for that question. Hopefully here in 2020 it will happen, and I saw the movement behind the ERA last year, and I think that it will happen. We take majority, it will happen. What we need to also pay strict attention to is those parities as it relates to, in my opinion, wages for women, right? I have a wife and 2 daughters, and even I have some recent stories that I can tell about my 25-year-old daughter who's working right now and trying and working at a level that's comparable to her colleagues, her male counterparts, yet people on her staff don't want to give her the pay. And why is that? She has rights, and what I told her was address it, challenge it. We have so many things going on in the ERA that the ERA addresses, and I think come this next year, it will pass. It will pass, and I support it. I'm fully supporting the ERA amendment.
Thank you. Dr. Lopez.
My earliest political memory was at the age of 4 in 1974 when my mom carried me on her back at an ERA rally in front of the White House. She wore one of her many t-shirts that said the exact same thing: a woman's place is in the House and the Senate. And now I've seen the other version. It says a woman's place is in the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office. Last year, not this past session, but the session before, I put in the constitutional amendment bringing the Equal Rights Amendment to Virginia. I've supported similar legislation in the past. I supported wholeheartedly, as part of leadership, our efforts this year that were incredibly strong to get it passed. We had public statements by numerous Republican members of the House that they were going to support the Equal Rights Amendment. And then we actually had David Yancey, a member of the House of Delegates who won his last election by having his name taken out of a porcelain bowl, say in an op-ed that he would support the Equal Rights Amendment. We actually agreed as a legislative caucus that we would try to force the Equal Rights Amendment to the floor and force a vote finally on this issue after years and years and years. but we did it. And then every Republican member, including women who were members of the Republican caucus, decided not to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment, except for one person, David Yancey. And on a 50-50 vote, it failed to pass. That is shameful. Shameful, because we could have been the 38th state in America to actually get the ERA passed. And that would have been a huge step forward for our nation. I put that legislation in honor of my mom and my cousins and my friends and every one of my constituents who's fought tooth and nail for this issue for decades. It will get passed once we have a majority.
Thank you. So the next question will begin with Delegate Lopez. What needs or preferences of citizens of the 49th District are different than the rest of the state? And how do you address these issues?
The 49th District is the world in a zip code. There are over 100 languages spoken in our district, over 40 languages spoken at Wakefield High School. I remember my first day of orientation in 2011. A member of the House Republican caucus, who was a freshman with me, said, "Son, there ain't 100 languages spoken in the world." It took me 3 days to prove to him that there are 412 languages spoken in Indonesia, 200 plus languages spoken in Europe, 4,000 languages spoken in Africa. He was very good-natured about it. But we have serious needs when it comes to immigration, when it comes to issues of ESL and HILT students, when it comes to funding education, when it comes to the DREAM Act, when it comes to higher education, when it comes to small business issues, that other parts of Virginia simply don't see. The 49th District, my neighbors, my friends in this district, are the rich tapestry of what Virginia is becoming. We're what's best about Virginia. And I find that it's my job a lot of the time to explain that rich tapestry to folks who either don't see diversity or in many cases, or in some cases, don't want to see that diversity. So it's important that you have an advocate and a champion in Richmond who is constantly talking about the strength that diversity brings and the strength that a place like the 49th District brings to the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Thank you for that question. So, we live 49th District, which is one of the most culturally diverse regions, not only in the Commonwealth, but in America. That's one of the reasons that my wife and I, we came here 10 years ago from Belgium and said, you know what, let's go to a location that, our kids can adapt, because they were around kids in an international environment. And we came to Arlington. And I've come to Arlington and been at the grassroots level for 10 years, and what I see is a lack of representation or understanding of what the people are going through in this diverse community. We are bright, we're smart. One of the, 90% of the people who live in Arlington, 49 in Arlington, have bachelor's degrees. Make no mistake about it. But when we talk about effective representation and having an innate understanding and perspective of what our people are going through, I've been there. I've done that. And that's what we need in Richmond. We can all work together, but unless you, I feel, have sat at the table and been at the grassroots level and have an innate understanding of what people go through day in and day out, you can't get it. And my job would be to empower and bring other people along with me, not just take all the credit. That's what I'm about. Empowering others, bringing up other people up by their bootstraps and employing them to do the same.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick comment here that the diversity of issues that people are raising is really amazing to me. Like the diversity of the 49th District, perhaps. Next question starts with Mr. Spain. Concerning criminal justice reform, What is your position on these three issues? Civil forfeiture, the felony threshold, and the restoration of rights of former offenders.
Thank you for that question. The felony threshold, there's a lot of debate going on with that right now in our Commonwealth Attorney's race. But we need to have that felony threshold up to $1,500, at least $1,500. That's what I support. Restoration of rights. If you serve your time to society, I believe that you should have your rights restored automatically when you're done. That's what I believe. And the first question again, ma'am?
Civil forfeiture.
Civil forfeitures. No one, given the makeup of this unique society and environment, there are individuals out there that have a hard time making it from day to day to start with. And for them to end up going to court and have a judge or someone take something away from them or forfeiture them and they can't afford to pay for it, it's just wrong. So we need to look closely at that. And I say again, I know in the Commonwealth Attorney's race, they're talking about that, but as a legislator, there's things I can do as well with my colleagues in Richmond. The criminal justice system in a whole, ladies and gentlemen, needs to be reformed. Having sat and been at the NAACP for a number of years, and now I'm here in this audience, right? It may not be as fluid as it should be, or perhaps others may do, but I know the issues. Criminal justice system is flawed. Racial disparities is going on, disadvantages of people of color, a host and litany of things are happening and occurring right among us. So, and I think as a legislator, to be in Richmond, to advocate on behalf and look at these issues will be important. Thank you.
So I have actually a record of working on criminal justice reform issues going back several years. In fact, my legislation to pass the ban on driver's license suspensions was actually finally gotten done this year. I was working with the governor's office and the AG's office for years on this issue. And the fact is that it's over 600,000 people, most of them people of color, in some regions of the state, were falling into this trap where they served their time, and then they were not allowed, if they didn't pay their complete court fines and fees, well, then they had their driver's license suspended, which is completely counterproductive. You should not be demonizing someone for being poor. You should, especially in the Code of Virginia. It's a modern day debtor's prison. We finally addressed it this year. To answer the three questions, I think my opponent, civil forfeiture is actually when you're going and you've been stopped by a police officer and they take something from your car. It's not after, mostly it's not after a judicial proceeding. So we are actually working on ways to address that. That's something that's being worked on in both a bipartisan way. The felony threshold issue, I was the chief co-patron of Les Adams' bill that increased the felony threshold last time. And yes, it does need to go up to at least $1,400, $1,500, or $1,600. And then also with the restoration of rights. I put in legislation on the restoration of rights several times, or actually a couple times, and worked solidly with Aaron McCullough to actually get that change in policy passed in Virginia. He went through the Lion's Gate trying to get that done. He was taken to court twice by the Republican caucus because he had the unmitigated gall of trying to restore rights for folks who had served their time. This is a no-brainer. We are one of only 4 states in America that don't address this. If you've served your time, you should get your rights back. You should be allowed to vote. The fact is that it helps with recidivism.
Thank you. There are a number of really good questions here, and I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but we're going to try summarizing perhaps a little bit here. So our next question begins with Delegate Lopez. Thank you for remembering. There are numerous questions about the issue of immigration and the immigrant community. that I'm not quite sure even how to.
I can get in the weeds.
How to get that across, but I will say that there is a question about driver privilege cards, about DACA, about in-state tuition, about whether Arlington should be a sanctuary county, and how we might protect the immigrant communities during the Census 2020 count.
Right.
Woo!
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me.
Maybe you have 2 minutes to talk a little bit
Ha!
about
I need 2 hours.
the immigrant community.
All right. So what I find myself doing, because of the nature of our community, is actually fighting for immigrants and new Americans and Latinos on a regular basis down in Richmond. I was able to get legislation passed and work to get legislation passed that actually covered, had Medicaid funding covered for immigrant mothers and children that actually saved the state $3 million. I was able to get notario fraud addressed so that immigrants weren't being preyed upon, and we worked in a bipartisan way to get that legislation passed. We're able to fight for the DREAM Act every year. We're able to try to fight for things like in Arlington, in the first 8 months of 2017, the number of incidences of or reports of domestic violence went down 75%. The number of reports of sexual violence went down 85%. Is that because it wasn't happening? No. It's because in the first 8 months of 2017, immigrants were too scared to actually report those crimes, because if they did, they were worried that you might get caught up in the ICE detention process or one of your relatives would. I put in legislation to address that. But what I find myself doing constantly in the House of Delegates is standing up and going toe-to-toe with everyone who would put in 287G bills, put in anti-sanctuary city bills, who would put in any legislation that would demonize immigrants and new Americans. These ugly, divisive, wrong-headed bills that are put in every year by folks who have no concept of our community, who have no concept of how beautiful we are, and who put in these bills solely for political gain locally, in mostly rural parts of the state. And the fact is that I'm proud to stand up, and I've fought tooth and nail to fight for dreamers, to fight for our immigrant communities, to protect our immigrant communities, everything I've done in the legislature. And I will continue to do that going forward.
So, my wife of 26 years is Hispanic. She came to the States, moved to Houston, Texas at her age about 15 years of age. I'm 2 generations removed from slave owners, all right? Immigration is important. It's an important issue. We need better integration of our dreamers into society. I understand that. And our immigrants don't need to be walk around fearful in a society of what may happen, for example, if they says someone that something is going on or they're reporting an issue. We have that going on as well. Stigma, things associated with our immigrants going out, reporting incidents, and they're in fear, walking around in fear. We shouldn't have that happen. I think the delegate and what he talked about, and I followed him and what his passion, and he's an immigrant himself, what he's done the past couple of years is commendable, and I applaud him for that. And I'll be right there along with him in some of the things he's done if elected as a delegate. We're a nation of immigrants. 49th district is very diverse and people from all walks of society. And we need to do everything in our power as elected leaders to ensure they are fully represented and protected. I will do that.
Thank you. I'm trying to be cognizant of the time. Think about whether we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Okay.
Try it. So one of there are 2 questions that involve question about the budget. So one was a very specific question about how is money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund going to be distributed. But the larger question is, how do you propose to fund all of the new and expanded programs that you support?
Is that, oh yeah.
Start with
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Then one's like,
Aren't
what
you
is
glad
Spain
you
going to
first?
say? Yeah, right. Haven't been involved in the budget process at the state level. Regardless of who you are and where you're at, even at the state level, you have to take a measured and focused approach and look at it holistically, the issues. I mean, the issues concerned that I would like to address, we need to make sure we're deficit neutral from year to year. We're not overspending, of course, and I would do my due diligence in that regard. So with that, I practice what I preach. I think my history precedes itself in that I'm not one for reckless spending, especially of other people's money, the taxpayers' dollar, and I will remain vigilant and diligent in my duties if elected to the office. Thank you.
Delegate Lopez?
Budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. They say who we are and what we value. And just to clarify one point that my opponent brought up, in 1971's rewrite of the state constitution, we have to have a balanced budget every year. We have to. Here's the thing. We put funding into the budget for motion picture tax credits. Tens of millions of dollars. We put funding into the budget for a yacht tax credit in years past. For $2,000 if you buy a boat that's like over $100,000 bucks. Don't quote me on that. Here's the thing. Budgets are moral documents. We need to put our values and make our values a priority. You can balance the budget and address things like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, ID and DD waivers for people who are developmentally disabled. There is a wait list. Hundreds of families across Virginia. So many in Northern Virginia who need help trying to take care of a developmentally disabled child. And we, instead of fully funding that need every year, have a motion picture tax credit. Budgets are moral documents. We have a majority in the House of Delegates. The budget would be a very different document.
Thank you. Are you finished?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, we could go on longer. I could talk about, like line items and things like that.
So this will be the last question, remembering all of you that all of the questions will be submitted to the candidates' campaigns. If we could flesh out your areas of agreement and disagreement. This question is going to Delegate Lopez first. List 3 issues that you agree with your opponent on, and 3 issues that distinguish you. That's a very good question, by the way.
3 distinguish. Okay.
It was mine.
3 that we agree. We need to fund our schools, and we need to address the school-to-prison pipeline. And we also need to address areas where we can improve the lives of immigrants across Virginia. And one thing I just want to make very clear, I come from a family of military folks, and I honor his service to the Marine Corps. And we should all honor his service to the Marine Corps. Where we disagree or where we have distinctions. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is critical time in the Virginia House of Delegates. We need to have someone who has a nuanced and complete understanding of the process, of the issues, of the policies, and of the priorities in Richmond. It is a very unique kind of policymaking body with the Jefferson Manual and the Mason Manual and how we get things accomplished. Now more than ever, we need someone coming into the House of Delegates who has seniority based on the Jefferson Manual, who will go in as the majority whip, who will have a committee chairmanship to actually be more effective in advocating for our community. Beyond that, I wouldn't say that I've seen much from my opponent in terms of where he differentiates from me on policy. So I'd leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those kind remarks there, Delegate Lopez. So what I appreciate and agree with the delegate on is his, he has a level of sincerity and a passion as it relates to taking care of our immigrant community. I really appreciate that. Your policies and your initiatives, more especially, I saw you out there with the ERA and the amendment that was being proposed, what you were doing at the legislature. So in that capacity, I agree with everything you were doing. That's probably why you won't see, we don't differentiate that much as it relates to policy. But where I disagree in some parts is that, even after serving 26 years in the Marine Corps, I understand that nothing is given and it's all earned. We have a tendency, even as a party, to, you go up the corporate ladder, you get in positions, and you just stay there. We have to rid ourselves, I think, within the party, Democratic Party, of that mindset, or we're going to leave generations of future leaders behind because we don't empower our young to move up. That's what I've been doing my entire life. It was never about Julius, the Marine. It was about what can I do in the time I was there to bring other people up behind me, right? And that's what we should continue to start doing here. And I think, the incumbent can do more in that regard, and that relates to effective representation and outreach. And I know he has some efforts. And I'm not here to berate him in no way, shape, or form. But we can do more. I want to do more. And to this piece about the nuances of policy and the manuals, we have we're not the first individuals to travel this road to go into office. You don't have to be a lawyer or a doctor to be able to serve your people. And that's what I'm doing in this campaign. I'm going out and knocking on doors and talking to people who have not been involved per se in the process, and I'm listening to them. And I'm hearing what they say. And hopefully they come out on June 11th. Because at these type of environments, I appreciate these forums. But there's more we can do to bring forth an inclusive type party and environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Catch your breath.
Come up here.
Because.
Yeah, gotta be disciplined, right?
To remind the timers, we're going to switch now to the concluding statements. And so they have 3 minutes to make a concluding statement, and we'll begin with J.D. Spain.
Good evening, everyone, again. And I typically have a prepared statement for closing. But we all family here. And, I said it early on at the beginning, and that the core of this election, what I feel it's about is judgment, character, integrity. You as the voters are going to have to make a decision on June 11th. The incumbent has, in some regards, a treasured history by many, and for others, questionable. The job of serving as a delegate for the people of 49th is challenging, it's difficult, but we can do better. I have that proven experience. I may not have, at this point, the corporate knowledge and all the understanding, thereby pertaining to the roles, the scope, the intricacies of the office. But it's not that difficult. What we have to do is give people a chance. I'm not asking anyone to give me anything, but my past history and performance have shown and proven that I'm a doer. I'm a go-getter. I make things happen, right? I'm not taking corporate money or PAC money. I'm about the people, and that's what we should all be about. So I hope on June 11th, as you go to the ballot box or you're doing absentee voting, you think about the future of not only the Democratic Party, but think about the future of our leadership. Mr. Spain is not there to sit around 8 years, 12 years, and hold down a seat. I want to be effective, but I also want to provide other people the opportunity and work for the people. And if you do that right, in 2 to 4 years, you'll be exhausted, I think. But the incumbent has traveled on, and I admire. He's doing some work there. But I believe, I know, I can do better. Thank you.
I adore being the House of Delegates member from the 49th District. I adore fighting every day for my community, my neighbors, and my friends. I adore the fact that I'm able to take my experience from working in the Clinton White House, working in the Obama White House, working as the Assistant Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, working as the head of Congressional and Federal Affairs for all of Virginia for the 4 years of the Kane administration, taking my legislative transaction experience at the highest levels, at the federal level and at the state level, and helping you, the community I love. There is, when you talk about an innate understanding, my dad was undocumented. Came here at 19, the dream of a better life. He built a life here, in this home. And every time I work on immigration issues, I see him. Every time I see a dreamer, I see my dad. I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting. There is nothing in the world as rewarding as helping people. Meeting a family that has a roof over their head because of my Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Making it easier for veteran, women, and minority-owned small businesses to grow and thrive. Helping one dreamer and dozens and hundreds of dreamer students get in-state tuition and a college degree. Negotiating the deal between the Commonwealth and the developer so that our community doesn't lose the convenience of the DMV on 4 Mile Run. Making sure a constituent family doesn't lose their heat in the winter. And ensuring that the social safety net is there for future generations. Going forward, we need to create more prosperity and do it in a way where everybody wins. We need to invest in our infrastructure and in our workforce, and most of all, in our children. Today, to do that, we need experience and a deep, nuanced understanding of public policy and the legislative process in Richmond. The issues that we're going to be dealing with over the next 2 years are critical if we're going to keep Virginia moving forward. I will continue to be a champion for our values and our priorities. I will continue fighting for the community that I love, and I will continue fighting for a majority in the House of Delegates that truly reflects Virginia and our shared principles. And I will continue fighting for a Virginia that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind. Thank you. My name is Alfonso Lopez. I ask for your support and your vote on Election Day. Thank you very much.
So again, a hearty and grateful thank you to our candidates. Let's give them another round. And to our co-sponsors, and to the League of Women Voters of Arlington, and to you, the audience, both here and those participating through the live stream. We thank Delegate Lopez and Mr. J.D. Spain for their willingness to work diligently for the people of the 49th District, and together we wish you well. There were several areas of potential questioning that either were not raised or that we didn't have time for. So we have the room for another few minutes if people have other questions. I was thinking about things like racial equity, the environment, a little bit more about Amazon perhaps, etc. Want to remind everybody that Election Day is June 11th. And there are forms here to either register to vote or to register for absentee voting. What else is there, Joan?
Oh, we have our books and our t-shirts.
And books and t-shirts.
And candidate information.
So,
in-person absentee voting is open, correct?
yes.
Yeah, it
That's
started
Friday.
April 26th, it started.
Right,
June
correct.
8th.
To June 8th at the
All right,
courthouse.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, that's right.
I am now. I moved 2 blocks and I moved out of, I used to live in the Hope District then, but I moved left side, like 2 blocks, I moved into Sullivan District, it goes down Road Street, between Roslyn and Courthouse. Now I just checked on the
We the people.
right here, I was like, I'm in Hope District, right? I am. doesn't matter because
They're gonna take a position.
yes, no, but regardless of whether I'm interested in one or not, I'm still in
Maybe I'll submit one directly.
Hey, see you as well, Claire. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Chris.
Hello. Sorry, I came in late.
I gotta go right. Good to see you, friend.
Try to smile.
How
How are you?
Is this still going? Oh, but it's Central Library. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean not to send it to you. So I didn't mean not to send it to you. Nice, babe. Oh, shit.